When Sundar Pichai stood with Lakshmi at Sidhu, Moosewala's house, the air was heavy that morning. The streets of Punjab were silent, but not because life had stopped. It was because grief had pressed its weight on every house, every shop, and every heart. Sidhu Moosewala was gone, and his absence felt like a wound that refused to close. When Sundar Pichai arrived with his mother Lakshmi, no one expected them to come quietly, without any announcement. There were no flashing cameras, no loud guards, no bright lights. There was only a tall man in a simple shirt holding his mother's hand, walking slowly towards the house where silence itself had become louder than any words. The first few steps of Sundar into the narrow lane were enough to turn heads. People whispered to one another, "Is that Sundar Pichai?" But their voices carried not in shock of a celebrity, but in surprise of humility. The CEO of Google, one of the most powerful men in the world, stood like any ordinary son, supporting his aged mother as they moved through the crowd. Lakshmi's eyes were wet, not just because of Sidhu's death, but because she knew what it meant for mothers to lose their children. She had carried her own fears all her life. The thought of losing Sundar during his struggles in America, the lonely nights when she wondered if her son was eating enough, sleeping enough, or surviving in a land so far away. Now, as she stepped inside Sidhu's house, she felt the pain of a mother who would never again see her child return home. Inside the house, the family sat quietly. The father of Sidhu, his mother, his relatives, none of them spoke. Grief had robbed them of words. Sundar bent his head in respect, and Lakshmi pressed her hands together. It was a scene so powerful that many in the room felt tears roll down their cheeks without even realizing it. But then something unexpected happened. An elderly man, a distant relative, stood up and said, "What is a man like Sundar doing here? He is from Silicon Valley. What does he know about our pain?" His words cut through the silence, creating tension. The room shifted. People looked around, unsure if this moment of comfort would turn into a moment of conflict. Sundar looked at the man, then at the grieving parents. He did not raise his voice. He did not defend himself with pride. Instead, he spoke softly. "Sir, I may live far away, but I was raised here. I know what it means when a mother cries. I know what it means when a father feels helpless. My mother taught me that pain has no border and kindness must have no limit." Those words sank deep into the hearts of the family. Lakshmi then placed her hand on Sidhu's mother's shoulder, a gesture so tender that even the man who had questioned them lowered his eyes. It was not power that spoke in that moment. It was humility, respect, and shared pain. Still, the suspense grew. The crowd outside had swelled. Many young men stood with folded arms, anger still burning inside them over Sidhu's death. They whispered, "Why has Sundar come? Is it only for show? Will he leave like all others, giving promises that mean nothing?" Their suspicion grew louder, and soon the sound of voices pressed against the walls of the house. Sundar knew he had to step outside. He turned to his mother. Lakshmi squeezed his hand and said in a low voice, "Remember what your father always told you. When words are heavy, let silence carry them. When pride is loud, let kindness break it." When Sundar and Lakshmi stepped outside, the young men stared at him. Some had tears in their eyes, some had anger, some had confusion. Sundar did not speak immediately. Instead, he walked forward, bent slightly, and touched the dusty ground of the village with his hand. Then he placed that same hand on his chest. The crowd fell silent. It was in that silence that the tears spoke louder than words. Sundar did not need to explain why he was there. The simple act of bending, of touching the soil, of showing that no matter how far he had gone, his roots were here, broke through the anger. Young men who had come with suspicion felt their eyes soften. Some turned away quickly, hiding their tears. Others looked at Lakshmi, who stood like a mother to them all. This was not the end of the moment. It was only the beginning. Because as Sundar looked at the young faces, he knew he could not leave without giving them something more than comfort. He had to give them hope. But would they listen? Would they trust him? Or would suspicion rise again? The question hung in the air. like a thread between trust and doubt, between healing and anger. And that was where the story began to truly unfold. Whispers of doubt, voices of hope. The air outside Sidhu's home still carried tension. The crowd of young men, standing with folded arms, stared at Sundar as if waiting for him to prove his reason for being there. Some were silent, but silence was not always peace. It was sometimes suspicion held back by respect for the elders present. One boy, hardly older than 20, stepped forward. His eyes were red from crying, but his voice was sharp. "You come from America," he said. "You live in big houses, eat food in foreign restaurants, and walk in offices where thousands of people follow your orders. What do you know about the dust of this village? About the pain of seeing our brother taken from us?" His words were like stones thrown into still water. The crowd nodded, their anger rising again. Sundar did not look offended. Instead, he looked at the boy with calm eyes, the kind of eyes that did not rush to reply but first tried to understand. "You are right," Sundar said softly. "I live far away now, but I was raised in the same dust you speak of. I was raised in a small house where my mother cooked on a simple stove, where my father saved every coin to buy me books. I'm not here to say I know your pain completely. I am here because pain does not need translation. Grief is the same in every language." The boy's lips trembled, but he stayed quiet. The crowd, however, did not disperse. They waited, as if testing Sundar. Then Lakshmi, who had remained silent so far, stepped forward. Her voice carried the weight of a mother's truth. "Do not judge my son by where he works today," she said. "Judge him by where he came from. I have lived the life of a mother who sent her son far away with nothing but prayers. Every mother's heart is the same. When I see Sidhu's mother today, I do not see difference. I see my own reflection in her tears." The crowd softened. Some looked at their feet. Some bit their lips to stop themselves from crying in public. Yet one man, older and rough, raised his voice again. "Words are good, madam, but what will they do for us? Our hearts are burning. Our streets are filled with anger. Will words bring Sidhu back?" Sundar turned to him and said, "No, words will not bring him back, but words can guide where anger goes. If anger burns inside, it destroys us. If anger turns to action, it can build what Sidhu dreamed of. He sang for unity, for pride, for courage. If we only fight with rage, we lose him again. But if we rise with respect and wisdom, his voice will never die." These lines carried weight, but the test was not over. Suddenly, from inside the house, Sidhu's father slowly walked out. His steps were heavy, his face tired, but his eyes sharp. The crowd fell into silence again. Everyone respected him. He stood before Sundar and said, "My son's life was short, but his words were long. They reached millions. Today, millions are angry, confused, and heartbroken. Tell me, Sundar, if you stand here, what will you do to help them heal? Because comfort without action is like water poured on burning coal. It creates more smoke than peace." The question was direct. It was a challenge, but not of hostility. It was a father demanding truth. Sundar took a deep breath. He looked around, at the crowd, at the house, at the faces of people who carried both sorrow and doubt. "Uncle," he said gently, "I cannot promise miracles, but I can promise honesty. I can promise to carry Sidhu's message into rooms of power, into places where decisions are made. I will not let his name fade into silence. And here, with you, I can promise something more. I will stand with you not as Sundar Pichai, the CEO, but as Sundar, the son of Lakshmi, who was raised to never forget his people." As he spoke, tears slid down Lakshmi's face. She held Sundar's hand tightly, as if reminding him that his strength was not in his title, but in his roots. The father of Sidhu looked at Sundar for a long moment. Then, with trembling hands, he reached out and placed his palm on Sundar's shoulder. "If your words are true, son, then stand with us not for today only, but for tomorrow too. Do not let this house become just another stop for sympathy. Let it be the beginning of something greater." The crowd watched in silence. A few men who had come with doubt now wiped their eyes. The same boy who had questioned Sundar earlier lowered his head, ashamed of his anger, but at the same time grateful for the honesty he had seen. And yet, beneath this moment of unity, shadows still moved. There were whispers in the crowd, some voices saying Sundar meant well, others saying he was only here to calm people and then leave. Trust was building, but it was fragile, like glass that could break with one careless touch. Sundar knew the journey was only beginning. This was not about one visit, one speech, or one act of respect. It was about carrying the weight of broken hearts and turning it into strength. He looked again at the crowd, at the parents, and at his mother. Deep inside, he knew a storm was still waiting. A storm of politics, a storm of doubt, and a storm of grief that could turn into anger again at any time. But Sundar also knew one truth. Storms test the roots of a tree, and if his roots were strong enough, maybe he could stand tall not for himself, but for the people who needed a voice. The storm outside, the crowd outside Sidhu's home did not leave. The whispers became louder. Some young men argued among themselves. One said, "Maybe Sundar is here for respect. Maybe he is true." Another shook his head and replied, "No, he will go back to America, and nothing will change for us." This doubt was dangerous like dry wood near fire. It needed only one spark to burn. Sundar stepped back from the house and looked at the street. The faces staring at him were filled with questions. He understood that grief had not only broken hearts, it had also left behind confusion, mistrust, and anger. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the air. A man with a long scarf around his neck shouted, "If you truly respect Sidhu, Sundar, then stand with us against those who silenced him. Do not just talk about peace. Talk about justice." The word justice spread through the crowd like a wave. People began nodding, their eyes burning again. They shouted together, "Justice! Justice!" The sound grew so loud that even the family inside the house turned their heads in fear. Lakshmi gripped her son's arm. She whispered, "Be careful. This pain can become dangerous." Sundar looked at her and then at the people. He raised his hand, asking for silence. But silence did not come quickly. The cries for justice grew louder, and some young men began pushing forward. It seemed as if the storm was about to break. Finally, Sundar spoke. His voice was calm but firm. "You are right. Justice is important. But ask yourself, how do we get it? Do we burn our own streets? Do we fight each other? Or do we rise so high that no one can ignore us?" His words slowed the shouting. The young men looked at him with restless eyes. One of them asked, "Then tell us, how do we rise? What can we do when the powerful do not listen?" Sundar walked closer, his steps steady, his mother watching with fear but also with pride. "We rise," he said, "by showing the world that we are not weak, not broken." Sidhu's voice was power. His words reached across oceans. If we let anger destroy us, his enemies win. But if we turn his dream into action, education, unity, progress, then his name will shine forever, and no power can silence it. There was a pause. For the first time, the crowd listened without shouting. Then, a young girl in the corner, hardly 16, spoke softly. Her words were almost lost in the noise, but Sundar heard them. "My brother used to play Sidhu's songs every morning," she said. "He said those songs gave him strength. If Sidhu wanted strength for us, maybe we should not let anger take it away." The girl's simple words cut deeper than speeches. The crowd turned to her. She stood with trembling hands but with truth in her eyes. Sundar looked at her with gratitude. "You are wise, little sister," he said. "Your brother was right. Sidhu wanted you to be strong. And strength is not only in fists, it is in the heart, in the mind, and in the courage to stand tall with respect." But even as the moment calmed some hearts, danger still lingered. From the back of the crowd, a group of men whispered among themselves. Their faces were hard, their voices filled with suspicion. One of them said, "This man is clever. He speaks of peace to keep us quiet. Do not trust him." These whispers did not reach Sundar directly, but their effect spread slowly. Trust was growing, but so was doubt. Inside the house, Sidhu's father called Sundar back in. "Son," he said, "you have spoken well. You gave strength to many hearts. But remember, words are seeds. If you leave them without care, they will not grow. Will you return, or will this be your only visit?" Sundar looked into his eyes. "Uncle," he replied, "I will return. This is not the end. I cannot take your pain away, but I can stand with you as long as you need." Lakshmi placed her hand on Sidhu's mother's lap, a gesture so tender that it melted the silence. "A mother's pain is endless," she said softly. "But if we share it together, maybe it becomes lighter." The family wept quietly. The house, once filled with unbearable silence, now carried the sound of tears that connected hearts instead of breaking them. But outside, the storm had not ended. The men who doubted Sundar were already planning to test him. They wanted to see if his promises were only words, or if he truly had the courage to face what lay ahead. And so, the path before Sundar was no longer just about comfort. It was about proving truth in the face of suspicion and kindness in the middle of anger. The test of truth. The night after Sundar and Lakshmi visited Sidhu's house, the village streets did not sleep. Groups of young men gathered in corners, their voices low but restless. Some spoke of Sundar with respect, others with suspicion. "He spoke well," one said, "but words are easy. Let us see if he returns when the pain is no longer in the news." Another replied sharply, "Why should we trust a man who lives in America? He will fly away, and our pain will stay here." But not everyone agreed. A girl who had been in the crowd earlier defended Sundar. "He came with his mother," she said. "He did not bring cameras or banners. He came as a son, not as a leader. That means something." Still, the whispers of doubt spread like smoke, and smoke always tries to hide the fire of truth. The next morning, Sundar sat with his mother in the small guest room given to them. Lakshmi looked at him carefully. "My son," she said, "you carry their trust like a fragile pot filled with water. One wrong step, and it will fall. Are you ready to walk with such care?" Sundar nodded slowly. "Yes, Amma. I came here not for show, but to stand with them. I must prove it, not just say it." Soon, a group of young men knocked on the door. Their faces were serious. "Sundar Pichai," one of them said, "we respect you, but we want to see if you are with us. Come with us to the fields tonight. Sit with us. Listen to us. Not as a guest, but as one of us." Lakshmi looked worried, but Sundar agreed. "I will come." That night, under the open sky, the young men sat around a small fire. The stars above seemed to watch in silence. Sundar and Lakshmi sat among them. No special seat, no distance. One boy began to speak. "Our pain is not only about Sidhu. It is about us. Our voices are ignored. Our dreams are broken. Tell us, Sundar, if you stand with us, how will you help us rise?" The fire crackled, and the question hung heavy. Sundar did not rush. He thought carefully and then answered. "You have the same fire in your hearts that I once carried in mine. When I was young, I had dreams bigger than the walls of my house. People laughed at me. They said I was chasing the impossible. But my mother told me, impossible only means you must walk further. I worked, I studied, I failed, I rose again. And that is how I reached where I am today. I cannot fight your battles for you, but I can guide you. I can open doors. I can give you the chance to rise with education, with skills, with unity." His words touched some hearts, but one young man remained cold. He leaned forward and said, "Education, skills, these are slow answers. Our anger is now. Our pain is now. What good are promises of tomorrow when our blood is still burning today?" The firelight made his eyes glow with fury. The group shifted, some nodding, some turning away in unease. Sundar looked at him directly. "Brother, I do not deny your anger. But answer me one thing. If we fight with rage today, what do we build tomorrow? Will Sidhu's name live as a song of hope, or will it be drowned in more violence? You must decide whether his voice becomes fire that destroys or light that guides." The young man clenched his fists. The night was tense. Lakshmi placed her hand gently on Sundar's shoulder, reminding him of patience. After a long silence, another boy broke in. Maybe Sundar is right. If we turn anger into learning, into strength, then we honor Sidhu. Maybe that is the justice we can give him. Slowly, heads began to nod. The fire burned lower, but the words had lit something brighter. Yet, as they returned to their rooms that night, Lakshmi whispered, "Do not be fooled, my son. Not all hearts are calm. Some will still test you. Some will still doubt you. And the true challenge has not yet come." She was right. Because in the shadows, the same group of men who had whispered against Sundar were making their own plans. They would not let him walk away with trust so easily. They wanted to see if his courage was real when faced with danger, not just words. And so, the stage was being set for a test that would not only challenge Sundar's strength but also his ability to keep his mother safe in a place where grief could turn to chaos at any moment. The confrontation, the next morning, began with uneasy silence. The village streets looked calm, but beneath that calm, whispers carried from one group to another. Some praised Sundar for sitting with the boys at the fire the night before. Others shook their heads and said, "Words cannot change fate. Let us see how long his courage lasts." By noon, Sundar and Lakshmi stepped out to walk through the fields. Sundar wanted to feel the soil, to understand the place that had given Sidhu his strength. But before they could reach far, a group of men blocked their path. These were the same men who had whispered doubts in the crowd. Their eyes were hard, and their voices carried the sharpness of challenge. The leader of the group, a tall man with rough hands, stepped forward. "Sundar," he said coldly, "you spoke of peace and respect. You spoke of turning anger into learning. But what use are such soft words in a world that answers only to power? Today, we will test if you are truly one of us, or if you are only here to calm us like a guest." Lakshmi's grip on Sundar's arm tightened. Her mother's heart sensed danger, but Sundar gently touched her hand, signaling calm. The tall man continued, "If you are truly with us, then prove it. Walk with us to the square where Sidhu's name is painted on the wall. There, in front of everyone, show your respect, not with speeches, but with courage. If you fail, then leave this place, for we need no empty shadows." The challenge was clear. It was not about words anymore. It was about action. Sundar nodded. "Take me there," he said quietly. The men led him and Lakshmi through the narrow lanes. Soon they reached the square where hundreds had gathered. The wall bore Sidhu's face, painted with bright colors, but the crowd's mood was heavy. The tall man turned to Sundar. "Stand here and speak to them. Tell them what justice means to you. If your words are lies, they will know. If your heart is weak, they will see. And if you cannot face their questions, then you are not one of us." The crowd's eyes burned with expectation. Young boys, old men, women in tears, all watched closely. Sundar stood tall, but he could feel the weight pressing on his shoulders. Lakshmi whispered, "Remember your father's words. Silence has strength, but truth has more." Sundar stepped forward. The crowd waited. He looked at the painted face of Sidhu, then at the people who had loved him. His voice was steady, yet filled with pain. "I did not know Sidhu as closely as you did," he began, "but I knew his voice. I knew his dream. He sang not just for music, but for pride, for courage, for hope. Today, you are angry, and you have the right to be. But ask yourself, what would Sidhu want from you? Would he want his people to drown in rage, or to rise with dignity?" The crowd listened, silent but tense. Sundar raised his hand and pointed to the soil beneath their feet. "This ground has taken many tears," he said. "But do not let it drink your blood in vain. Justice is not in burning our own homes. Justice is in showing the world that Sidhu's voice cannot be silenced. I promise you, I will carry his name into every hall I step into. I will tell the world his story, not as a politician, not as a businessman, but as a son of this soil who cannot forget where he came from." His words echoed in the square. People began to nod, some wiping tears from their eyes. But the tall man was not finished. He stepped closer, his voice sharp. Words again. "You are clever, Sundar, but we still do not know if you carry courage. If the police or the powerful stand against us, will you stand, or will you run back to your safe world?" The challenge was heavier now. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. Sundar's silence lasted only a moment before he answered. "I cannot fight with guns," Sundar said calmly. "I cannot fight with fists, but courage is not in weapons. Courage is in standing tall even when you are afraid. Courage is in holding your ground when others want you to leave. Today I stand here with you. If danger comes, I will not run. Because respect is not shown in comfort, it is shown in sacrifice." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, unexpectedly, Sidhu's father, who had been watching quietly from the edge of the square, walked forward. His voice trembled, but it was clear. "This man has spoken with truth," he said. "He did not come here to calm us. He came here to remind us who we are. If you doubt him still, then you doubt me as well. And if you doubt me, then you doubt my son's dream." The crowd gasped. The tall man stepped back, lowering his eyes. Slowly, the anger in the air softened. Respect replaced suspicion. Tears rolled down faces again, but this time they carried weight not of grief alone, but of hope. Lakshmi stood beside her son, her eyes filled with quiet pride. She whispered softly, "You have carried the weight well, my son. But remember, the path ahead is still long." And she was right. Because even though Sundar had passed this test of truth, the journey was far from over. Shadows still followed him, and greater challenges were waiting to rise. Shadows of power. The morning after Sundar spoke in the square, the village seemed calmer on the surface. People greeted him with folded hands, some even blessing Lakshmi with kind words. But behind this warmth, shadows were moving. Far away, in offices where decisions were made, men in suits whispered about Sundar's visit. They did not like that one of the world's most powerful voices had stood with the people in grief. They feared his influence could awaken more questions, more unrest, more strength among those who felt forgotten. One man in a dark room slammed his hand on the table. He came here quietly, but his presence is not small. If Sundar stands with them, the world will listen. We cannot let this grow. While these whispers of power spread, Sundar walked with Lakshmi through the fields. His mother's eyes searched the horizon. "Do you feel it, my son?" she asked softly. "Peace is here in their eyes, but danger is walking behind us." "Not everyone will welcome your voice," Sundar nodded. "I know, Amma. But if fear stops us, then respect has no meaning." That evening, as the sun painted the sky in orange and red, a group of young men came to him again. Their faces carried worry. "Sundar Bhai," one of them said, "we heard that people in power are not happy with your visit. They say you are disturbing peace. Some even say you should leave before trouble comes." Lakshmi's heart trembled at these words, but Sundar's face remained calm. "Trouble does not scare me," he replied. "Silence in the face of injustice scares me more. I will not leave until I know Sidhu's family feels supported." The young men looked at each other, torn between fear and respect. One finally spoke, "Then we will stand with you. If shadows come, they will face us first." Later that night, Sundar sat with Sidhu's father again. The old man's face was lined with pain, but his eyes glowed with strength. "Son," he said, "you have given us comfort, but comfort is not enough. Already, forces outside are watching. They want to silence this grief before it becomes unity. If you stay, you must be ready. They will not test you with words anymore. They will test you with fear." The room grew heavy with his warning. Lakshmi placed her hand on Sundar's arm, her voice shaking. "You are my son. I carried you in my womb. I raised you with prayers. I want you to stand with truth, but I cannot lose you to danger." Sundar looked into her eyes with tenderness. "Amma, your prayers are my strength. If I run now, then every lesson you taught me about respect and kindness will become empty. I cannot let that happen." The next day, the test arrived. As Sundar walked towards the square again, a group of strangers blocked the path. They were not villagers. Their clothes were different, their eyes cold. One of them stepped forward and said harshly, "Go back, Sundar. This is not your fight. You belong to big offices, not broken streets. If you stay, you will regret it." The villagers who had come with Sundar grew restless, ready to argue. But Sundar raised his hand, keeping them silent. He stepped closer to the stranger and spoke softly. "You are right. I do not belong to broken streets. But I belong to broken hearts, because grief has no boundary. You may try to silence me, but I am not here for fame. I am here for respect. If you threaten me alone. Do not touch those who already carry pain." The stranger stared at him, surprised by his calmness. For a moment, the air was thick as if a fight might break. But then the stranger smirked, muttered something under his breath, and walked away with his men. The villagers exhaled in relief. Lakshmi, who had been watching from behind, pressed her hands together in silent prayer. Sundar's courage had held, but everyone knew the danger had not ended. It had only stepped back to strike later. That night, the village square lit up with candles. People gathered, not with anger, but with unity. Young boys, old women, families, everyone held a flame in memory of Sidhu. Sundar and Lakshmi stood among them, their faces glowing in the soft light. Sidhu's mother, her hands trembling, lit a candle and placed it before her son's painted image. Tears flowed down her cheeks, but her voice was clear. My son's voice was strength. Today, I see that his strength still lives in you all. Do not let it die. The crowd responded with soft chants of Sidhu's name. Sundar felt the weight of that moment, the unity glowing like fireflies in the dark. Yet, as he looked beyond the candles, he saw shadows moving at the edges of the crowd, men with cold eyes watching quietly, waiting for their chance. The storm of power was not finished. It was only gathering strength. When silence became strength, the night of candles had filled the village with warmth, but the next morning brought unease. Word spread quickly. Men from outside were returning, and this time they were not coming only with threats. Their goal was clear: to break the spirit that Sundar had helped ignite. Lakshmi sensed the danger before anyone said a word. As she prepared morning tea, her hands trembled. "My son," she whispered, "the shadows are growing heavier. Today you will face more than words. Promise me you will not let anger guide you. Promise me you will hold to respect no matter what comes." Sundar touched her hand gently. "Amma, your lessons are my shield. I will stand, not with pride, but with humility." By afternoon, the square was crowded again. Villagers gathered, holding banners with Sidhu's name, singing his song softly, their voices carrying grief and hope together. Sundar and Lakshmi stood among them, blending in as one of their own. Then it happened. Black cars stopped at the edge of the village. Men in suits stepped out, their faces stern, their eyes sharp. They walked straight to the square, their presence heavy with authority. One of them raised his voice. "This gathering must end. This grief has lasted long enough. Disperse before we are forced to act." The villagers froze. Some lowered their candles in fear. Others clenched their fists, ready to resist. Sundar stepped forward. He faced the men calmly, his voice steady. "This gathering is not violence. It is not rebellion. It is remembrance. If you silence these people now, you silence the heart of this land," the man sneered. "And who are you to speak here? You are not a leader. You are not a politician. You are just a visitor from another world." The crowd waited, hearts pounding. Sundar did not shout back. Instead, he bent down and picked up a candle that had fallen to the ground. He lit it again and held it high. "I am a son," Sundar said softly. "A son of a mother who knows the pain of loss. A son of soil that has carried both struggle and hope. You may call me a visitor, but grief does not ask for passports and respect does not need permission." His words sank deep. The villagers, moved by his courage, raised their candles higher. Soon, the square was filled with flames again. Voices rose, not in anger but in unity. They began to chant Sidhu's name, not as a cry of rage but as a hymn of respect. The men in suits looked unsettled. Their power felt small against the silent strength of hundreds of glowing flames. One of them muttered in frustration, but none dared to act. Slowly, they turned back to their cars and left, their shadows fading down the road. The villagers erupted, not in cheers, but in tears. Mothers wept openly. Fathers pressed their hands to their hearts. Young men and women bowed their heads. Sundar stood still, his candle glowing, his face calm. Lakshmi walked to his side. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "Today, my son, you have shown them that silence can be stronger than noise. You have shown them that respect can be greater than power." Sidhu's father, his voice breaking, came forward. He held Sundar's hand tightly. "You did not let our grief be silenced. You stood with us when it mattered most. My son's songs will live longer because of voices like yours." The square fell into quiet reverence. No speeches, no noise, only the glow of candles, the sound of soft tears, and the weight of shared strength. As the sun set, painting the sky with gold and red, Sundar looked at the people, at his mother, at Sidhu's parents. He knew his journey here was ending, but his responsibility was not. He turned to the crowd and spoke once more, his voice gentle but strong. "I will leave this village, but I will not leave your hearts. I will carry Sidhu's voice with me into every hall I enter, into every place I stand. Because grief shared becomes lighter, and respect shared becomes eternal." The people bowed their heads, their tears shining like stars in the candlelight. Lakshmi placed her hand on her son's shoulder. "You came here as Sundar, my son. You leave here as Sundar, their son, too." And in that moment, the silence of grief transformed into the strength of unity. Tears spoke louder than words, and the story of that day would live in every heart that had witnessed it.